we will be discussing why Islam is nothing more than Quraysh paganism. I've already gone into pretty good detail about how Allah is the name of a Quraysh god who does seem to be synonymous with Hubal, the chief god of Mecca of the Quraysh. Some versions of history say it's Allah, some versions of history say it's Hubal, which would mean spirit of Baal, I believe in Aramaic. So Hubal had graven images associated with him, but as Allah, he did not have these graven images. One version of the story says that Muhammad's grandfather Abdul Muttalib, that when he discovered Zamzam well, he yelled Allahu Akbar. Now that part's confirmed. He had a son named Abdullah. Abd from the word Abed in Hebrew, which means servant or slave, and Ullah from the word Allah, meaning Allah. So servant of Allah, slave of Allah. Abdul Muttalib was going to sacrifice his son, Abdullah, the father of Muhammad, at the Kaaba, the Quraysh Kaaba shrine. To one version says to Allah, one version says to Hubal. But he consulted a witch with a familiar spirit, and what he ended up doing was he did divination arrows at the Kaaba, which is one of the things of Hubal. So if the story is about Allah, why is he doing Hubal rituals? So he cast the divination arrows, and he ended up sacrificing 100 camels, I believe, instead of his son Abdullah. So camels are unclean animals. This is not a acceptable burnt sacrifice to God. I don't even think it was a burnt sacrifice. I think he just, the same way they do the halal slaughter where they cut their throats and have them bleed out facing the Kaaba. That's what he did. So the Kaaba has pagan Quraysh origins. Muhammad's grandfather was a pagan Quraysh chieftain. Allah is the name of a pagan Quraysh god who is known to have 3 daughters, Alat, Al-Uzza, and Manat. I mean, everything about Islam screams Quraysh paganism, which is why I tell you, remember the law of Moses. This is the law that God gave us. This is the law that Jesus followed, John the Baptist followed, Solomon, for the most part. Nobody followed the law of Moses perfectly, but we do know what God expects from us because of the law of Moses. It doesn't say anything similar to Sharia. Okay, Sharia is a satanic Quraysh imitation of the Torah. So follow the Torah, know what the prophets said, and come to Jesus. That is what will save your soul. The blood of Christ and obedience to the laws. That's what saves you. Now, if you don't follow the entire Torah, if you don't make the effort to follow the entire Torah because you're confused, that's forgivable. But if you know the Torah is true, and you know Jesus wants you to follow the Torah, and you choose to reject the Torah, that's another thing. Because Jesus will tell you, depart from me, you lawless. So the satanic verses are words of satanic suggestion which the Islamic prophet Muhammad is alleged to have mistaken for divine revelation. First use of the expression was used in 1858. The words praise the 3 pagan Meccan goddesses, Alat, Al-Uzza, and Manat. These are the 3 daughters of Allah. Allah was known to have 3 daughters. Okay? And when Muhammad changed the religion and he made it monotheistic, he got rid of their 3, he changed that. He didn't want to associate any partners. He didn't want any partners to be associated with Allah. So he got rid of this verse. But at one point, when he was in Mecca, talking to the Quraysh, trying to win them over to his religion, he invoked these 3 goddesses to tell them, hey, we're on the same side. I'm just a branch of the Quraysh, but I'm a very powerful branch and you should join me. So Muhammad, it can be read by early prophetic biographies of Muhammad by Al-Waqidi ibn Sa'ad and the Tafsir of Al-Tabari. So these are 3 Islamic scholars very early in the day, well, not the days of Muhammad, but shortly afterwards. And they all affirm that Muhammad did say this. Muhammad invoked these 3 goddesses and asked for their intercession. But those verses were stricken from the record. Okay, the Quran is not the exact same book that it was since the very beginning. Some pages were eaten by a goat, according to Aisha. Some verses, some of the manuscripts, you can see clear evidence that they were erasing stuff, writing new things over it. I mean, the Quran is not as preserved as they tell you. And on top of that, Uthman burned all the copies of the Quran except for the version he decided to have canonized. So they compiled the Qurans, and there were slight differences between the Qurans, and the Muslims were about to kill one another over it. And Uthman, who by the way is a Quraysh as well, all of Muhammad's elite Islamic Caliphate members after his death were Quraysh, Ali, etc., Abu Bakr, all Quraysh. So, religious authorities embrace this story for the first 2 centuries of the Islamic era. So, in the first 2 centuries of the Islamic era, they accepted that Muhammad was deceived by Satan into praising these goddesses, but the verse was removed to not sow confusion. So, right there, that's a revision that is accepted in the early days of Islam. However, beginning in the 13th century, Islamic scholars, ulama, started to reject it as being inconsistent with Muhammad's perfection. How is Muhammad perfect? Didn't he have slaves? Didn't he kill people? Didn't he marry a 6-year-old? Didn't he behead every single male tribe, Jewish member of the Banu Qurayza tribe? How is he perfect? In what? Because we know what perfection is, because we know Jesus. So if Jesus is perfect, Muhammad can't be perfect. If Muhammad is perfect, Jesus can't be perfect. Because if Muhammad's perfect, then Jesus is weak. And if Jesus is perfect, then Muhammad is wicked. And Jesus was not weak. Okay, he came in peace the first time. He's not coming in peace the second time. When he was flipping tables in the temple because they were making a house of merchandise out of the house of God, that was a small, tiny little sample of what Armageddon's going to be like. Jesus has the power of God, and he will use it. Being inconsistent with Muhammad's alleged perfection, which meant that Muhammad was infallible and could not be fooled by Satan. How very interesting that Muhammad is perfect and cannot be tempted. So if that's the case, then everything Muhammad did is good. But if everything Muhammad did is good, then there is no standard of goodness, because if you study the life of Muhammad, you see bloodshed, you see deception, you see extortion, you see pederasty, sex slavery. I mean, this is a horrible, horrible man. And that's the thing. The same demons that possessed Muhammad and possess billions of Muslims all over the world. And they want to spread these demons all over the earth. That's how they think the world will come to peace. They think when Islam has infected the entire planet, there will be peace. According to some Islamic traditions, God sent Satan as a tempter to test the audience. Others categorically deny that this incident ever happened. The incident is accepted as true by some modern scholars of Islamic studies, citing the implausibility of early Muslim biographers fabricating a story so unflattering about their prophet. Yes, Muslims in the early centuries after Muhammad would not have lied about Muhammad like this. If it was, why would they lie about their prophet to make him look bad? This is clearly a true story, but over time it was removed. Islam is a shifting religion, because the Quran talks about Banu Israel, it talks about the children of Israel, it talks about all that stuff. But now they say it was Palestine. Now they say Solomon was king of Palestine. That's not what their holy book says. That's not what the Hadiths say. So Islam is constantly shifting the goalposts because it is the Antichrist religion, and it's moving closer and closer into the world of Satan. So when the 666 pops up, the Muslims are not going to be worried about it one bit. The Muslims all know that 666 is associated with paganism and Satanism and witchcraft and all that stuff. But to the Muslims, it means nothing. Alfred T. Welch, however, argues that this rationale alone is insufficient, but does not rule out the possibility of... Okay, let's just get to the narrative. There are some accounts of the incident which differ in the construction and detail of the narrative, but they may be broadly collated to produce a basic account. Different versions of the story recorded in early tafsirs, Quranic commentaries, such as Ibn Ishaq's. In its essential form, the story reports that Muhammad longed to convert his kinsmen and neighbors of Mecca to Islam. As he was reciting these verses of Surat an-Najm, considered a revelation from the angel Gabriel. It's not Gabriel. Have you thought of Allat and Al-Uzza and about the third one, Manat? Now, this is in the Quran. Nobody doubts this. Surah 53, 19 through 20. Satan tempted him to utter the following line. These are the exalted Garanik, whose intercession is to be hoped for. Now, Muhammad is an intercessor to Allah, according to the Hadiths and the Quran. When you're in hell, if you cry out to Muhammad, he's supposed to be able to intercede. And that black cube is also an intercessor to Allah. If you kiss the rock, it will help you to it will testify for you to Allah on the last day. These are their beliefs. So yeah, if Muhammad can be an intercessor, if a rock can be an intercessor, why can't these three pagan goddesses be intercessors too? After all, Allah, the Allah of the Quraysh, he has 3 daughters, Allat, Al-Uzza, and Manat. This is not debatable. Everybody who has studied Allah knows that before Islam, Allah was known to have 3 daughters. So Islam is a revision of Quraysh paganism. That's all it is. It's a pagan religion pretending to be Judaism, Messianic Judaism. Because, yeah, they give Jesus credit as one of their prophets. They don't quote him. Nothing he says in the Gospels is quoted in the Quran. All they say is, oh, your God, your prophet, Jesus, he worshiped my God. No, he didn't. He did not do a single thing that the Quran says is necessary for salvation. He didn't kiss the black stone. He didn't do any of that stuff. He kept the law of Moses. He prayed toward the temple, most likely. It's not recorded in the Gospels, but most likely because that's what you're expected to do. He did do pilgrimage to Jerusalem 3 times a year, which is commanded in the Torah. He never ate pork. He said it does not defile you, but it's not clean. Defiling is much worse. Muhammad was defiled. Muslims are defiled. But eating pork does not defile you. And Jesus kept the Torah. All right? Everything in the Gospels that can be construed as Jesus not keeping the Torah is a misunderstanding of the circumstances. Like when they brought the woman in adultery to Jesus to have him stone her. Jesus was not a witness. That's not how the law of Moses works. So when Jesus did not have her stoned, it was because it was a kangaroo court. It's not that, Jesus said, let whoever is without sin throw the first stone. So that was against the stoning of whores. That was against the law of Moses. No. Jesus had nothing to do with that case. They brought a woman who would have been stoned if they went through the law of Moses, and they brought her to Jesus' feet to tempt him. And Jesus was like, okay, if this is not a court of law, if this is just an angry mob, okay, whichever one of you in the angry mob is without sin, throw the first stone. So Jesus kept the law of Moses. Mark chapter 2, when the disciples are plucking corn on the Sabbath, Jesus does not join them. And the Pharisees are like, hey, your disciples are doing something unlawful. They're eating corn on the Sabbath. And Jesus says, you're condemning them for something that David did, except David did far worse. David was eating the showbread in the temple, which only the priests can do. And in the next chapter, when he heals a man on the Sabbath of his withered hand, he explicitly asks the Pharisees, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? And the Pharisees don't say anything. And he's angry about it because he's like, wow, so you know what I'm doing is lawful. And you don't want to admit it's lawful because you want a pretext to kill me. And that's exactly what happened. Have you thought about Al-At and Al-Uzza and the third one, Manat? These are the exalted Garanik whose intercession is hoped for. These were 3 Islamic pagan goddesses worshipped by the Meccans, worshipped by the Quraysh, along with Allah, who they worshipped as their father. Discerning the precise meaning of the word Garanik has proven difficult. It is a hapax legomenon used only once in the text. Commentators wrote that it meant the cranes. The Arabic word does generally mean a crane appearing in the singular. All right, whatever. So the word has cousin forms in other words, such as raven, crow. I think he called them harpies, now that I think about it. Harpies are like bird women type things. It's like a demon that looks like a bird. Like God in the Bible, it talks about unclean birds. I think that's what it's talking about. It's talking about harpies. Taken as a segment, exalted Garanik has been translated by Orientalists to mean exalted harpies, I would go with, but it says exalted women here. While contemporary academic Muhammad Manazir Hassan has translated the same segment as high-soaring ones, deities. Thus, whether the phrase... Anyway, the point being here is that the incident was recorded in Al-Tabari's history, the Tariq. The prophet was eager for the welfare of his people, desiring to win them to him by any means he could. Yeah, that's a man of God right there. These are the same things they criticize Paul over. It's like, oh, Paul is inconsistent. He talks about the Torah, and then he says against the Torah, and he says, I am all things to all people. It's like, Paul's a liar. It's like, okay, if Paul's a liar, what does that make Muhammad? Because he's far worse than anything Paul had ever done. Prophet was eager for the welfare of his people, desiring to win them to him by any means he could. It was reported that he longed for a way to win them, and part of what he did to that end is what Ibn Humayd told me, from Salama, from Muhammad ibn Ishaq, from Yazid ibn Ziyad al-Madani, from Muhammad ibn Kab al-Qurayzi, probably. When the Prophet saw his people turning away from him and was tormented by their distancing themselves from what he had brought to them from Allah, because that's not God. You can't call Allah God. Come on. If your God is not the God of the Torah, it's not God. He longed in himself for something to come to him from God, from Allah, which would draw him close to them. With his love for his people and his eagerness for them, it would gladden him if some of the hard things he had found in dealing with them could be alleviated. He pondered this in himself, longed for it, and desired it. Then Allah sent down the revelation by the star when it sets, your companion has not erred or gone astray, and does not speak from mere fancy. When he reached Allah's words, have you seen Allah and Aluz and Manat, the third and the other? Satan cast upon his tongue because of what he had pondered in himself and longed to bring to his people. These are the high-flying cranes, and their intercession is to be hoped for. So right there. This is what Muhammad's people said, that Satan tempted him to invoke these three pagan goddesses as intercessors to Allah. Well, these are the daughters of Allah. When Quraysh heard that, they rejoiced. What he had said about their gods pleased and delighted them, and they gave ear to him. The believers trusted in their prophet with respect to what he brought them from their Allah. They did not suspect any slip, delusion, or error. When he came to the prostration and finished the chapter, he prostrated, and the Muslims followed their prophet in it, having faith in what he had brought them and obeying his command. Yeah, it's crazy, because you know what's absolutely nuts? Now that I think about it, you know what is absolutely nuts? Muhammad had such loyal, fanatical, devoted people, except he never gave prophecies and he never performed miracles, and the voice of God never spoke on his behalf. And yet Moses saw God face to face, to the point, well, not face to face, but almost face to face, to the point where his face was glowing like an angel. God spoke the 10 Commandments from Mount Horeb. God spoke many times in the days of Moses to all Israel. Many prophecies, many miracles. I mean, Moses, you could not deny it. Absolutely could not deny that Moses and God were like father. God and Moses were like father and son. Like, that was the level of intimacy Moses had with God. And yet they didn't obey Moses. Here's this crazy, schizophrenic dude. Like, Muhammad's just completely out of his mind, and they're so faithful to him. Everything he says, they really take it like the word of God. I feel bad for them. I'm wondering if they would have been in Israel, if they would have been faithful to Moses. It's like, because I don't know if it's genetic, but the Hebrews are so disobedient to the God of miracles. And then these pagans are so faithful to Muhammad, who claims to speak for this God. So, yeah, they believe him. They believe him.